Hi guys, welcome to video 15 on age structure and the demographic transition model, also known as DTM. So when we look at different age structures, you need to have a basic drawing of each of these structures. This one you'll draw like a pyramid where it's big at the bottom, skinnier at the top. This one is also a pyramid, but not quite as exaggerated. This one is almost like a bullet shape, we would call it. And then this one, a lot of students say that looks like an ice cream cone. Whatever you need to draw to make sure you remember. What this shows is the percentages of males and females. So on the left-hand side of each diagram are males, on the right-hand side are females, and it also divides it up between age, which is why we call it an age structure diagram. So down at the bottom of the pyramid, the red represent the pre-reproductive age groups. You do need to know that is from 0 to 14. Those are people who are not yet able to reproduce. Now, obviously, there's some situations where that's a little bit different, but in general, we say these are pre-reproductive. Reproductive ages are anywhere from 15 to about 44. And then post-reproductive age groups are anything over 45. So typically people over 45 are not going to be reproducing. Again, sometimes there's exceptions to that, but this is just an average number. The other thing you need to know from this is which countries, so be able to name a few countries that this is happening with. So for expanding rapidly, this type age structure would say Guatemala, Nigeria, Mexico. These are going to be your countries that are not very industrialized. So these are not going to be like, developed countries. Most of them are going to be developing. Expanding slowly, so the bottom of your pyramid is not quite as big, but it's still expanding some. You have the United States, Australia, China. Stable, meaning that you kind of have no growth. It's just staying the way it is. Would be somewhere like Italy or Greece. Again, these are developed countries now. And then declining are definitely going to be developed countries. You have things like Germany, Russia, and Japan. So be able to talk about a few different countries and their age structures. So this is the age structure diagram of the United States. What you actually see here in the US are the baby boomers as they are aging and as they are going up into the age structure. So down here is when they were born, around the 50s. As they're getting older, they're 20 or 30 here. You see that there's actually a bulge. There's a bulge up here still. So my father is a baby boomer, my mother as well. You may know some people in your family who were considered that. They're in their 60s, 70s now. And as they age, it's a higher number of older individuals than we normally would see. So you see it's getting, a decreasing amount as you go up here. But then with the baby boomers, now we've got these older people who are hitting retirement age, who now we are having to support, and there's still about the same number of young people. So your age group, my age group, are having to support these older baby boomers when there's more of them than there normally are. So looking at our age structures, it really depends on your fertility projections. You can have different things happening in different places. So what this graph shows you is the population of people under the age of 15. Now, typically, that is going to go down as you are developing and becoming more developed. Your population of people who are over 80 is going to increase because you're able to live longer. And so your overall population, your over or 60 or over, is also kind of increasing. So this is kind of showing you what an age structure prediction might look like with fertility projections. So looking at where is our growth actually coming from, 17% of people in developed countries are under the age of 15. So that is kind of when they're hitting their reproductive age, they're getting ready to have children. Now, obviously, in the United States, we don't have children usually at 15. We kind of frown upon that. But, it is possible. And in a lot of countries, people do start having children around the age of 15. 32% of people in the developing region, however, are under the age of 15. So what that means is the base of your pyramid is really large, the people that are young, and what that means is they're going to get ready to have children, and it's going to keep your growth rate increasing. So if you have a few number of young people, then you're going, like in a developed country, then you're not going to have as much growth as if you have a ton down here. So this is why most of the growth for the world is going to be happening in developing countries. So looking at some places that have experienced growth, but then have actually kind of gone backwards a little bit. This is Botswana, and this is showing their age structure with AIDS and without. So here's what it would look like without, be kind of this nice pyramidal shape. And with AIDS, unfortunately, you have a much lower amount of babies and infants that are surviving. You have a little bit more bulge in the 20s, and then it kind of goes off dramatically up here. So this actually, the AIDS epidemic can really shift your population backwards. It can cause you to go back in the demographic transition model, which we'll talk about in just a second. So what are some problems with rapid population decline? It can threaten your economic growth if your young people, in their teens and 20s are more worried about their health and they're having health problems, possibly dying. That's not going to allow them to have a job and make money and provide income for their family. You also have less businesses, and because people just don't have the ability or the health that they need to go out and create their own business. So you're not going to get technology that's going to be developed. You're going to have public problems, public health and safety problems that go along with this as well. So looking at your population size, as your population goes from developing to developed, we use something called the demographic transition. You also hear it referred to as DTM, the demographic transition model. So as countries become more developed, their birth and their death rates start to decline for different reasons. So our pre-industrial stage, you have high birth rate, high death rates, which means you still have little growth. Even though you have a lot of babies being born. The problem is those babies are dying, and also just people in general are dying. They're not living as long. Transitional stage, you start to go through industrialization. Your death rate starts to drop, but your birth rate still remains high because people are still expecting that their babies are going to die. So that's why they're still having more. Industrial stage, your birth rate starts to drop as well because the death rate has dropped so dramatically. And people know now that they can only have, 2 or 3 children, and those children will survive and they won't die. And then finally, you hit the post-industrial stage where your birth rate falls below the death rate and you actually could get population to decline. So what does this look like? It looks like this. And I do encourage you to actually draw out a sketch. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just a kind of general look of the curves. So here's your stage 1, pre-industrial, high birth and death rate over here. So your overall population is still low. You start to get this J-shape exponential growth when we hit the transition stage where our death rate drops, but our birth rate remains high. So our population is increasing here. Stage 3, the birth and death rate are starting to come together because we have improved food and sanitation and healthcare and education. And then finally, you hit kind of this dip over here where your population levels off and then maybe even drops. And you end up hitting no growth. And then there's even a stage 5, which some people talk about as stage 5, where you actually have this negative growth over here. And again, here's your countries that you need to know kind of each stage where they are. You might see some of them listed differently. One might say industrial instead of post-industrial in some locations. But just have a general idea. What are some in pre-industrial stages? What are some in post-industrial stages? And what are some factors that can actually affect these death rates and cause them to decline? So as you go through the transitional stage, you start to have better food and water, better nutrition. You get medical care that you didn't have before. As you become developed, you have improved sanitation, personal hygiene. People start understanding the importance of soap and water, and they have the ability to do those things like wash their hands. You have safer drinking water because you can actually clean it and run it through. You might have actual toilets, and those toilets flush and take it to a water treatment facility. In the United States, we actually have a higher infant mortality, though, than we should. We're ranked 46th in the world, and the reasons are because we have actually pretty inadequate health care for poor people. So unless you have a lot of money and you can afford really good health care and insurance, then a lot of poor individuals don't get good health care. We have a lot of drug addiction problems, and we have a high teen birth rate. So because of all that, we end up having higher infants, more infants dying than most countries would at our stage. Okay, that's it. Come ready for a quiz.